while we talk too.
I know, it's so amazing. So for anyone who is new to Shanna, because she's been in these social audio streets a little bit, but maybe not as much as maybe someone like myself who moved into the social audio streets. So Shanna has a decades long career in fundraising, millions and millions and millions of dollars for billion-dollar organizations, managing massive teams, now as a leadership consultant, has a book being published by McGraw-Hill this fall. And I'm so excited for us to talk about all the things. Let's start with this. Let's talk about what it means to be yourself boldly. Let's start there, because I feel like what better way to start a Monday than to lean into how we can share our gifts and talents with the world.
Yes, and thank you for representing the brand so well, Sara.
It even matches my romper, which I just realized.
So Be Yourself Boldly is the reminder to be your truest, most authentic self, to put yourself out there, to follow through, to learn, and to enjoy what you're experiencing from the world. And I agree that it's a perfect reminder to start the week as we all bring that energy and our full potential to what we do.
Amazing. Amazing. So let's start at the very beginning again, because I have the opportunity to really know your whole story. You know, one of the stories that you tell in some of the articles that you've had published, so many incredible places across the web in the book, is the fact that when you first applied to jobs, and you just actually did a post for Gen Z recruitment, but the fact that when you first applied, you were rejected from 100 different jobs in your field of choice. Like, let's start there with what made you keep going and rise to the level that you did, and not just be like, maybe 100 rejections means this isn't for me.
Yeah. So in my 4 years in college, I worked as an intern in my dream career. I knew what I wanted to do at age 18, highly unusual. I felt very called and very driven by purpose to become a fundraiser and then to train other fundraisers. I worked in every experience that I could have as an undergrad, and then put myself out there on the job market my senior year, applied, interviewed. And that was like 100 interviews, not just 100 applications, because I know it's a tough job market. And this wasn't just like sending off a letter and praying. These were like people bringing me in, having a conversation, sometimes flying me out, and then saying, I'm sorry, we've hired someone else. And every single time they said it was because someone else had more experience. And, I think some of it was naivete. Like, I didn't know any better. Like, I didn't have a choice. I was graduating from college. I had to keep going. And I think the other part of it was I felt really, really focused that this was what I was meant to do. And when you feel that way, it doesn't really matter what anyone else says. They cannot deter you from what you need to do.
I love that. I mean, one question I have for you, because another thing that you write about is the power of mentorship and sponsorship. And I know it's something you believe in so deeply. When you were experiencing this, did you at that time already have kind of this strong understanding of how helpful mentors and sponsors could be and have someone to turn to? Or were you just kind of like figuring it out as you went at that point?
Yeah, I mean, mentors and sponsors are truly important in careers. And for me, I'll just define quickly how I think about mentors and sponsors. Mentors are people who are talking to you, to guiding you, and sponsors are people who are talking about you when you're not in the room and advocating for new opportunities for you. I feel really fortunate that I built a strong network by cold calling a lot of different people to say, hey, tell me about your experience in this field. What can I learn from you? What advice do you have? And so I built up what became a network of mentors, and then eventually sponsors, people who would call and say, hey, you should hire Shanna. I really think you should work with Shanna. The really challenging part is that none of that at the time was really helping me to achieve my goal of getting the job. And I think what my takeaway on that is that you have mentors and you have sponsors and they will support you, but ultimately you are your own best advocate for your career.
I mean, that couldn't be truer, because it's one of those things where, like, even if you find someone to hold the door open, or if you find someone to tell you how to walk through, you actually have to take the steps through. So one question I have for you, is when you were saying you were cold calling, so you, rose through the ranks in your career over almost 2 decades. I mean, do you think it's the same today that people would just pick up the phone and cold call? Do you think it should be a LinkedIn message? How can someone who's listening to this right now, who feels that they have that wherewithal, but they don't have the connections, go about building those connections?
Yes. So, I mean, LinkedIn didn't exist when I was applying for jobs. If it had, maybe this would have all been a lot more simple. Yes to a LinkedIn message or an email or a phone call. I think it's the idea of, why are you interested in this job? What will you uniquely bring? Doesn't mean you have to have had all the experience, but show the hiring manager why you're interested in this and like what you can uniquely do. And I admire when people do that. I think it's great, even if they filled out the formal job application and process with the company, if they take the time to say, I'm really interested, and they don't expect anything. They're not expecting me to respond or to follow up with them necessarily, but they're just saying, this was so important to me, I wanted to share. I admire that they took the extra step and really did what was important to themselves.
And that's such an important reminder too, because so often we think, what if someone judges me for reaching out? Well, what if they do? There might also be someone like you whose judgment is that you're proud of them or you're impressed that they took the initiative. And those are the people who they want to lean into in their career anyway.
Yes.
So I want to fast forward. I want to like go through like the montage part of the movie. Like we're starting at the beginning. Now we're just going to like roll through the next like 15, 18 years. And you are now managing a huge team of people, raising a ton of money at important institutions. Talk to me about where your passion for writing about leadership in this moment came from.
So I learned a lot of things throughout my career, sometimes because I had the passion to keep following through, sometimes because difficult things happened and I had to work through them. And I just kept having this feeling that it didn't need to be this hard. Somebody could have said, hey, Shanna, here's some insider tips, or here's what to remind yourself of when you're having a difficult day. And I felt this compelling notion that I wanted to be able to provide that for other people. And so this was when LinkedIn blogging was like just a thing. And I started with sharing other people's articles. And then I tested the water on sharing my own, and it seemed to really resonate with people. And that was really where I found that this audience, I mean, this is where social plays such an important role in connecting with, hundreds, millions of people, is that there is a community of people who are waiting for the story and the message that you have to tell. It's exactly what they need that day. And it felt very powerful to think that one person, that was the only person I was focused on, that one person would benefit from whatever it is that I was able to share that day.
Yeah, that's such an important reminder when we get too caught up in the vanity metrics and how many people are we reaching in, is this content converting, on what's the ROI? This idea that, but what if you reached that one person who just needed your insights? And, one thing I know about you, Shanna, is you love to read. How many books do you think that you were reading, like at any given time, like when you were in that kind of, mid leadership stage, like just trying to like kind of figure it all out and piece together the book that didn't exist for you?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. That's a fun question to think about, how many books I was reading. I don't read simultaneously. Like I don't read 3 books at a time. So it was always one at a time. I would say definitely 1 to 2 a month. And then all the articles that I read on top of it, which of course is how I found you, by reading your articles. And that's what I love so much about business and leadership articles as well, is you can distill like this very big concept into a short amount of time and connect with someone while they're walking to their next meeting.
Yeah. Speaking of distilling ideas, I have a question for you, because you really initially gained a lot of your traction in your thought leadership in articles, and you're evolving with the times. You're filming reels, you're doing shorter form content. Do you feel that, like, what is that like for you as someone who just is a thought leader who wants to share their message with the world? Because obviously I create content for thought leaders, but I'm curious for you as the thought leader, like, do you feel like you're still getting your message across in your reels? Do you enjoy doing that? Is it annoying? Do you wish you could just write articles? Like, I'm kind of curious what that experience is like for you.
I really love writing articles because I feel like I'm able to give the whole story. I'm not like, here's one important thing and Godspeed with the rest of your day and figuring out your life. And I think
I
that's
love
something.
that description of Reels and TikToks. I wish that that was actually the official description.
So I think that's the big challenge for me. And that is the big challenge in creating content, really, is that, you're supposed to repurpose it and you're supposed to just like give one idea because it's too overwhelming. But I'm the kind of person that if I hear the one thing, I want to know two and three. And because the one thing, it's just not comprehensive enough for me. And
Mhm.
so even in my reels, I'm like, here's the four things you need to know. And if someone drops out because they only wanted to listen to one, well, that's up to them. But
Right.
for that person who really needed that like hand holding, I want to be there.
I love that because I always say, hold your audience by the hand and walk them through whatever you're teaching them. So I want to stick with for a little bit the moment in your career because you've made a big career shift this year, but I want to stick with when you're in this very senior leadership role, you're leading and mentoring this team, you're creating content around leadership, and one of the things I've always wanted to ask you is actually, how do you go about asking someone for $100 million? Like, how do you do that? Let's talk about that for a minute.
Oh, yeah. So fundraising is a fascinating thing because it is, I mean, you are putting yourself out there, but it's really not about you. It's about the organization and the mission that you're representing. And it's about connecting people's interest and goals, sometimes ones they don't even know that they have, that you have to find and pull out for them, with the organization's needs and goals. So it's a lot of, putting together puzzles, connecting dots, like all those descriptions. So when I ask for a gift, I'm creating a bridge between someone's goals and the organization's needs, and truly feel like I'm creating a bridge between what their potential is and their joy. And like that is a very happy bridge to walk across. It
Wow.
doesn't mean that I don't feel nervous when I do it because I take it so seriously. Like it's not the ask that I take so seriously. It's this responsibility that I have in playing some tiny part in making this wonderful thing happen.
I love that whole description because so often we think of literally of asking for money as icky. Sorry.
Totally. No,
Or
people at cocktail parties are like, oh, you're a fundraiser. I do not really think I want to talk to you anymore because they think I'm going to
yeah.
ask them for money at a cocktail party, which, by the way, I will not. But I can.
First of all, it's good to know you're now invited. You're now on my party list. You would have been before anyway. But this idea of like the bridge to their joy, that's really, I've never heard that before. But this idea that you can help them. You know what I mean? It's not that you need something from them, but that you can help them. That reframing is so powerful in so many different elements of business.
Yes. And I find that a lot of the skills and things that I taught to fundraisers, I'm applying to myself in business too, in the sense that, we call it cultivation in fundraising, this idea that you are going to build this beautiful relationship and understand their motivations, understand about them as people. I'm doing that in business too. And, what motivates people? What do they need? What do they not know yet that they need? And then how can I use my active listening skills to be able to understand that? But it's also really helpful in conversations with friends and conversations at cocktail parties and networking because my job is to understand who people are and what drives
Mhm.
them. And I think it creates a really special connection in a very short amount of time.
Absolutely. So you're a master networker. So I want to put a pin in that and come back to that because we absolutely are going to. That's really important to me. But I want to go back to before that when you were saying, talking about the role of active listening as a business owner, because you launched your firm this year with no clients that I'm aware of, right? Like you didn't go in with a contract. You just were like, I have connections. And so you literally built it from the ground up after you launched it. And, for the business owners listening who are struggling, they have prospects, but it's not converting. Talk to me like really specifically about what that active listening to build a relationship that converts looks like.
Yes. So First, if you're struggling, just keep going, believing that it will be possible, and then make it possible. That is how I feel every day. I still get nervous. I still feel unsure, but I do believe that I can tap into what is important to people. So in a conversation with someone, whether I know them or not, and we're talking about, I ask them, like, what is it that's important? What are you trying to achieve? What are your goals? And then I try to ask follow-up questions, because what they think that they want to achieve or what they're sharing with me might just be a part of it, or it might be the umbrella. And what's really underneath there is how I'm going to be able to show why I'm uniquely positioned to work with them. So for example, like, if people say we're working on team retention, everybody is, okay, great. What is it that success is going to look like when you do that? Why is this so important to you right now? And just continuing to help pull out those threads, because I might find out that, the company down the street has doubled all our salaries, and that's really exciting to people, and that's why they want to leave. Okay, well, that's a very different kind of workshop or consulting than if you want to do this proactively before your people are ready to go.
Yeah, there's actually my friend Elijah Bowie always talks about the importance of the question why now. And I feel like you're kind of talking to that as well when you're saying kind of figuring out exactly what the goal is in this moment.
Yes.
So that's super, super powerful. Give me another example. Like, let's role play for a minute. So,
Sure.
like, if you think that, I could be a good prospect, and I'm like, yeah, Shauna, you're brilliant, you're talented, but like, I don't even really like know, how we'd work together, or what that really, like, what that even looks like.
Yeah. So, Sarah, when you think about 1 year from now, what do you want to say you've accomplished over this year? What do you think will make a meaningful difference for you and for your team? And I would pick one of those, and then I would really try to understand, because most people are able to articulate where they're going, but they don't know how to get there, or they don't know how you can play a role in helping to get there. And sometimes I don't know how to do this myself. I'm still figuring this out as a new business owner, because I'm so eager to get them there that I forget that, like, I have to your point, hold their hand and walk them through what that looks like and why exactly I'm the one to be holding their hand.
Well, and one of the things that is special about you is that you are a very accomplished woman, and you're not afraid to walk in that. So let's hit on imposter syndrome for a minute, which disproportionately affects women, because I know that women in leadership and women's success is so important to you. Is that something that you've had to cultivate, to, like, when they say, oh, like, this is where I want to be in a year, to be like, I'm the one, I can do it. Have you really had to cultivate that? And is it something that you still work on a regular basis, or do you just feel, kind of confident walking them through it?
There's something very freeing about going out on your own after working in really wonderful organizations for a very long time and doing something for someone else, such that the imposter syndrome that I feel isn't about whether or not I'm the right partner for them. It's about, how do you sustain this over the long term? And what do you do in the quiet moments before things get busy again? But I really fundamentally believe, if you're going back to that mug and the be yourself boldly, that whatever your mantra is, whatever your reminder is, whatever that post-it note on the side of your desk says, you belong in that room. And whether or not they choose you doesn't change whether or not you belong in that room.
I mean, that's an important moment that I hope everyone holds on to who's listening. And one of the things that I love about you, Shauna, too, when you're talking about that, that post-it note on your desk, is that one of the ways that you uplift women is that you just send those notes of encouragement to friends of yours. Speaking of networking, talk to me a little bit about that tradition.
Oh, I do love this. So I have like 100 different kinds of stationery, and I love sending a handwritten note to someone, whether they got a new job or even were just, interviewing for a bunch of different jobs, to remind them that they are strong and powerful and brave. And I do this via text, certainly too, to help be with someone in the moment. And what I love about it is that I always say, like, this is a reminder that you are not alone. This is a reminder that I'm cheering you on. And I tell them I have no expectation of a response, because in those moments, sometimes it feels like a lot of pressure that you have to get back to someone. But that's not what this is about. This is not a I need you and you need me. In this moment, I just want to be there for you. And I get such joy out of those special, unexpected notes that I'm able to help people feel supported when they need it.
That's incredible. And first of all, I love the fact the word joy keeps coming up in this interview, because I feel that it's so just central to your being, that it's just threaded through the answers. And so I just want to call that out because I think that that's really special. I had said that I had said two things. I said, if you have a question, you can raise your hand and come on up. So if you have a question throughout this live interview, raise your hand and come on up. But the other thing is that we were going to do is get back to networking. So one of the things that you have done is you've connected with like serious power players in your space, like name brand, keynote speaking, books on the shelf of CEOs. How do you make those connections?
I know this sounds like really simple, but I just send an email and reach out. Either I'm sending it to someone directly and I'm telling them a story about how they played a role in my growth or affected my life or made me think differently. And, much like the notes I send to friends, I go into this with no expectation, because what I can control is being able to share whatever I'm feeling with that person. And I hope that it makes them feel good in that moment. But when they do write back, and oftentimes they do, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so exciting, because it gives me a chance to then develop a relationship with them too. And, sometimes I'll ask someone for a warm intro. That's always a great way to do it. But I think there's something really powerful in just saying to someone, you had a meaningful impact on my life, and I wanted to share that with you.
Yeah, I mean, what more could someone ask for? It's so interesting that you say that. Actually, literally this weekend, I reached out to Leah Haberman, who writes my favorite social media newsletter. It comes out every Friday. And that's literally what happened almost organically. I, had said to her, oh, I recommended your newsletter to two more people. And she was like, can I ask you what you like about it? And I just sent her a few voice memos. And she was like, these mean so much to me. And then she followed me on Instagram. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm such a super fan of hers. By the way, for everyone listening and watching the replay, Leah Haberman's social media newsletter every Friday is, have I sent it to you? I mean, it's so
No, I'm
blocked.
gonna go check it out right now.
Well, and I'll send it to you. But I had that experience. And here's the other thing that I love that you're saying is that I do think energetically that if we control our expectation and tone, that'll come through. Like I always say when I read your writing, like I can tell in the writing, like you were flowing here, you felt this. So like it's not surprising to me that if you're reaching out in like a warm, joyful way, that's what you're going to get back. Whereas I think sometimes when people are forcing it, just like when they're forcing their writing and you're like, this isn't resonating with me, if they're coming from a place of transaction in themselves, that's going to come through in their writing and it's going to affect their ability to network.
Yes, people can tell that right away. I mean, anyone here can think about a moment where they were in that room and they felt like someone was either trying too hard, or worse, was like focusing on other people, like to make them not feel valued in that moment. And so it is about the genuine connection that we aspire to create, and that comes through.
And that's such an important point as well. Like you're saying that people who, it's like that Maya Angelou quote that people will never forget how you made them feel. And like you're saying, it's so fascinating how our careers meander, overlap, and develop over time that like, I do think odds are you will be in the room with that person 10 years later. And the funny thing is like, they might not remember that they ignored you or they would have, but you'll remember, you know what I mean? And similarly, if someone's kind to you, you'll be like, this is the person who is kind to me. You'll always remember that.
Always, always those moments. I think about, the call that you get when you when you just feel really alone, or the friend who comes over to give you a hug when you're feeling and thinking about something even unrelated to the moment that you're in, or the comment that you get on something that you share. I mean, those are moments of genuine connection, and they stay with you. And one of the things that I know that you and I have talked about that we really value is this tradition I learned from one of my mentors, the Add a Girl folder, which is where you keep either an electronic folder or an actual old school paper folder where you put these memories in there, and you look back on them, on your hardest moments and your hardest days, which we all have, as reminders of how you have influenced this world in a positive way.
Yeah. And Shanna, I'm just now like threading through the connection in this kind of being your ethos and core values and how you network and how that comes through in your social media feed. And when you were saying in how you connect with people and how you make those emails and connections. And, it's something that I'm really passionate about as well, that our online life and persona and our in real life and persona are one and the same. That I always say like online is in real life because we're in real life. And so I just think that's such a powerful reminder, like you're saying, that all of these things that would make a difference in human connectivity and relationships in real life. It can be a card, like you're saying, it can be a card, it can be a hug, it can be a phone call, it can be a text, it can be a LinkedIn message. And if we look at all of these, instead of this overwhelm with the platforms, as more opportunities to connect with others, and come at it from that angle, it shifts from overwhelming to really being like, wow, that's incredible that I have this many opportunities at my fingertips.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that what you're doing right now is creating that opportunity for others. So you're creating a space where that is possible for others. And I love that you're able to use your fantastic energy and your expertise to make that possible.
Thank you so much. I received that. And my follow-up question for you, because I mentioned overwhelm, is how do you not get overwhelmed? Also, so like here, you have this big badass job and, a massive thought leadership presence that you are nurturing in community, and you're starting to write a book, right? And you're a dedicated wife and mom, and, you care about your faith, and you care about your fitness, and especially as a woman, this is a passion point for me because there is some advice out there for women that says pick. Like there's a famous book where like the whole idea is pick three, that like you get to kind of choose, like if you get friends or if you get family or if you get the job or if you get the faith or if you get the fitness or if you get the community, there are only a few things that you can pour into. So talk to me about the reality of being a multifaceted woman leader, what it feels like, and your tips for success.
Yes. Okay, so many wonderful things here. Okay, so yes.
That's why you wrote a book on it, which we'll get to in a minute, but give us the clip notes.
So I think what is really important is that instead of looking at all of these things as competing with each other, to look at how they complement each other. And I think that's how I've been able to approach this without feeling overwhelmed, that I don't have all these distinct identities. I figure out how they align. So am I doing fitness with my partner, that day? Am I going on a coffee date on the way back from school drop off? So that we can have some time together? Am I, as soon as the day is over from my day job, sitting down and working on my thought leadership and then reflecting on what happened during that day at work? I mean, I think why people feel like you have to pick whatever that number, and I have some feelings on that, is that people do get overwhelmed with trying to do it all. Mm-hmm. And I really, really like the word integration, as you know. We stop feeling like we're competing with our identities and instead look at them as a complement to each other and part of the whole, and also give ourselves grace. Then they add to who we are. They make us better in every aspect, as opposed to detracting from who we are and what we want to accomplish.
I love that. I think it's so important because I actually think that when we select a certain number to pour into, the gaping holes from the other things end up being like sinkholes, is kind of what I've learned the hard way. So I love that advice about integration. We've talked about the book a couple of times. Tell the audience live on YouTube, watching the replay, You're writing a book. Tell us about it.
I am. I'm writing a book. I am
You've
just
written
about
a book.
finished
Like,
right now.
title,
I
you've
know.
written a
It's
book.
like done, done, done. And what a journey! Like so much learning. It is meant to support women in particular in growing as people, advancing their careers, developing as leaders. This concept of one bold move a day is that every single day you have the capacity to put yourself out there in ways that you define as a bold move, whether that's saying yes to a new job or moving across the country or speaking up in a meeting or calling a friend. All of these are bold moves. And that when you make this commitment to yourself, that you will be able to fulfill your potential. And I'm really excited to share this with the world, particularly at this moment that we're all in.
Let's dig into that moment for a moment. I can't believe I've never asked this question, but it just came to me. What if I the reader, I the person, I the audience member, have a day or a series of days where I just want to go back to bed?
Mm,
Make a bold move.
yeah. So here's the really interesting part about the bold move. Like understanding when you need to rest is also a bold move.
Mm.
Saying it is okay to not be okay is a bold move. And I think that's what I feel so much why this can really resonate with so many different people is that when you hear bold move, you like think about this and like lights and all of these, it goes back to that thing that our identity is so much more than any one thing. And
Mm.
being okay within that moment, this is what I need right now. This is the right thing for me. And tomorrow I will try something different.
That's good. That's good. How do you, or how could one, um, you know, I hate the word pivot post pandemic. I have like a difficult relationship with it. But I guess one question I have for you, so I can say something that I personally struggle with is that like if I feel like I'm really on the path and then I like take that rest, I struggle with going from one to the other. So like going from hard driving to resting or going from resting back to hard driving, I find judgment on either side of that equation with myself. So how do you approach that personally?
Yes. So oftentimes it is the judgment with ourselves that holds us back from being able to make our bold moves or do the things that are right for us. And so the first thing I would say is defining what a rest period is really important. Does that mean, for example, that I am not going to work out for the next 3 days? Or does it mean I'm not going to go on social for the next 3 days? Or is it both of those things?
Mm-hmm.
And then saying, but it's 3 days. And at the end of that time, I am going to go back. And then texting a friend and saying, hey, on Thursday, I'm going to go back to my schedule. And I just need you to send me a quick note on Thursday so that I'm accountable to you and that you're supporting me. Because I think it's important to know that you're not alone in making these choices, which we often feel. And that's where that judgment comes from. And then continually giving yourself grace to say, I did what was best for me in this moment. And I am not judging past me. I am setting my future me up for success. And that for me to really set myself up for success, I can't look backward. I can't judge. I have to accept. I have to learn.
I think that's good because to your point, so often it's the feeling bad about the rest we already took that's like hindering us from going back to being kind of our full self, as opposed to the fact that we're not ready yet. It's actually the fact that we're giving so much energy to that um, almost disappointment in ourselves. And I feel like in some ways, disappointment can be an obstacle to being bold. So we talked about kind of the internal when you're judging yourself. How do you suggest that people kind of get back up off the mat and be bold if something external to them happened, if they lost their job, if they, broke up with their partner, if they, whatever the case may be, like, how can I be bold if I feel like the world is like slamming doors in my face, if I'm getting the 100 job rejections?
Yes. So I think it's really important to honor the loss and honor the feelings that you have instead of fighting them. And I know that in the past, I have tried to just work through them as if they're not there. And I do myself a disservice in that. It is okay to say, I am sad. You have permission to feel angry. You have permission to feel disappointed, to say that I am giving myself this space to do that. And that will help you feel like you can own that moment, so that when you are ready to get back up, when you're ready to try again, that you are also going to allow yourself to have permission to do that. I think it's this hiding and this pushing down of feelings, Sara, they eke back out. You and I know that. Like, even when we think we've got it all covered, people feel that around us. So just saying it's okay to feel whatever it is we're feeling. If we don't feel that sadness, we will not feel that true joy.
That is powerful. I do have a question for you, though, bringing gender back into it. So I actually saw this hysterical reel a while ago that was something to the effect of like, it was like women, like what's like kind of like a passive aggressive flex that you do to like point out gender norms in the workplace. And this young woman gets on and she was like, every time that a man in my office like raises his voice or gets heated in a meeting, I raise my hand and say, "You're being a little emotional right now. Would you like us to take a 5-minute break and reconvene?" Which was just funny because the reality is that men are allowed to be. It's like when you compare Supreme Court nominee hearings side by side, or when you look at, men in athletics versus women in athletics, when you look at so many different things, we know that if men get heated and feel those feelings, people are like, they really care. And if women really feel those feelings, people are like, they're really emotional today.
Mm-hmm.
So how can women live into the advice to feel their feelings and still be taken seriously, be powerful, get promoted, all of the things?
Oh, okay. Well, that's like a whole other conversation. It is
We're
real.
getting into it. We're getting into it.
So, gender expectations really hold us back in our careers and our lives. We are supposed to be a certain way, act a certain way, talk a certain way, dress a certain way. And I think that when women can embrace that emotions are their superpowers, as opposed to, again, hiding these feelings,
Yeah.
it might be that we have to over articulate and over communicate what we're doing. So, I've cried in a meeting. Maybe you've cried in a meeting before too.
I'm a crier. I cry like every day.
So, but I was raised in a time and in a field where, like, there's no crying in business. And
Or baseball.
um, so in those right. So in those experiences, I felt shame, I felt guilt, I felt like all the things. And if I could go back and tell myself what to do this time, like to replay those moments, I would say it is okay to feel what you're feeling. When you are ready to say something, you can say, "Hi, I'm having a very strong reaction to this conversation. This is very far off from what I thought that we were going to be talking about. And this is how I'm able to process it right now." And so I think it just helps women to own that moment instead of letting it happen to them, because that happening to you is where that shame and guilt spiral comes from.
I like that script. I love a good script. To say, I'm having a strong reaction in this moment because this wasn't what I expected. Because what I like about that is that it opens up the dialogue, because the natural follow-up question is, how is this different from what you were expecting? What were you expecting? How can we move closer together? It expresses that it's not just you coming out of left field with emotion, it's you meeting something that came out of left field. And I like that reframing.
Great. Well, I'm sure that we could both use it at some point.
I'm looking forward to your future article on this topic with that script. We just handled part of our call for this week. I'd like that to be the next long form article. I'm ready to read it. I'm excited. Oh my gosh. So another passion point for you that I'm so grateful will be in the book is not only uplifting women in the workplace, but uplifting working moms. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about what your experience has been like as a working mom. Obviously, also writing that article for Motherly and so many other times where we've talked about as a thought leader, not just being a woman in business, but a working mom in business and still making your bold moves every day.
Yes, so many feelings about this. When I have a 13-year-old son, and the first thing I would say is that you don't stop being a working mother just because your kids get older. I think there's this perception that, like, we have to only focus on women with young babies or toddlers, and yes, we do. And I just have a different experience of being a working mother of elementary, middle school, and eventually high school age child. So I'm learning that there really needs to be that full spectrum conversation, and I want to be a part of leading that. But I think when my child was born, people really weren't still talking about being a working mother. And it's not that long ago, but people, it was just like people would assume that when you went on a maternity leave, you weren't going to come back. I mean, that was like an actual conversation that people would have. And not only that, what they would encourage you to really think about staying home so that you could be, quote, a better mom. And those were the messages that were being thrown at us. And you know what? I did think during my maternity leave that I wanted to stay home, which shocked me because I have this purposefully driven career for my whole life. And there was this time where I really thought I wanted to, and I didn't end up doing it. My husband and I had a lot of conversations about it. I didn't end up doing it. And I know that I made the right choice for me. Mm-hmm. And for those women who make that choice for them, that's the right choice for them. But I think what's so powerful now is that we have to lean in and have these conversations, mm-hmm. talk about them more. So I really value that you're bringing it up right now too.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I was so grateful to have you, not only as my client, but as my friend, as my mentor when I had Rhea, my youngest, to have all of these conversations, because I've actually always known that I would be a terrible stay-at-home mom. I have an amazing stay-at-home mom. I actually joke because I'm so grateful. My mom lives 10 minutes away. And I always say she is my kid's Pinterest mom. Because she is the one that they make the hand turkeys at Thanksgiving and all of that stuff. She's amazing at that. They have the best relationship with their daughter, but I don't have that gene. I love my girls. I'm super close with my girls, but I'm not a natural, I think stay-at-home moms actually have this, and all stay-at-home parents, stay-at-home dads as well, mm-hmm. stay-at-home people who non-gender identify, there's this expansive thinking. And I actually think for us, because we think so much about the workplace, you understand that people have different skill sets, talents, passions, natural ability. And I think that, there are different ways to be a parent. And there's a stereotype of a stay-at-home parent that they have a certain skill set where they're very inventive and they're very the Pinterest mom stereotype, right? And so for me, I'm not a Pinterest mom. I'm a super active mom, but I'm not a Pinterest mom. And I'm very focused on what I model for my girls and the conversations we have, but I'm not a crafter. And I kind of felt guilt about that, mm-hmm. And I knew that getting back to work would make me a better mom for my girls, because if I was feeling really engaged and proud of the work I was doing, I like having the conversations with them at the end of the day where we all talk about what we did that day and they share what they achieved in school and I share what I achieved at work. That's meaningful to me. And I think what you're saying too, too many women feel guilty about that. We feel like we should only be asking them about school. My good friend Steph Jansen just hopped in the room. She's also a very powerful working mom, but this idea that it's okay to not just talk to them about what happened at school today and then do arts and crafts or take them to the park, but talk about your work.
Yes, particularly important. And I feel this acutely as the mother of a boy. I feel like I know my job is to raise him so that he is respectful of women, that he understands some of the struggles that I have in the workplace, some of the things people say to me. And why that's not okay, and what my feelings are like in situations, so that he can be the kind of person I would love to work with in a workplace someday. I
love that. We're just going to take a beat there before you finish your answer, because Shanna, you also just made me realize that I always say it's important what I model for my girls because they need to know that they can do this and they can do that. It's important what I model for my girls. It's important what I model for my girls. And I'm so grateful you bring into the conversation, it's also important what we model for our boys. So thank you for bringing that to the conversation.
Well, I think what's really wonderful is that we are learning from each other. I mean, I love watching the videos of you showing the girls when you're exercising all together. I think that that's really powerful because you are showing them that it's okay to be strong. Mm-hmm. And this is what it means to be healthy, not just in body and physical, but also in your mind. And then I think it's just as important for me to be sitting with my son and working on an art project, right? And saying, or something that might be stereotypically, whatever that means anymore, feminine, to show him that there is whole sides of people. We are not ever one thing. And we are definitely not only boy, only girl, only anything. Nobody is. and that we can be more empathetic in the workplace by understanding where people are coming from. That's going to be who they are when they grow up too.
I love that so much. And I'm going to take a moment because you talked about something that I care about so deeply as parents. I'm so grateful to see like the self-love and body confidence movement amongst women, but it has not yet moved to our children. And I think that that's a huge problem. And one of the things that was really massively upsetting to me, because I believe that our children are fully formed humans their entire life. Like babies are not dolls. So just like they don't have to go to someone without their consent. One of the things that drove me crazy was that people all the time would look at my older daughter and always be like, oh, she's so chubby, she's so what, like they would like comment on her body like it was cute from an early age, and it drove me crazy. And I would say like, so here's the thing too, she'd be talking, she'd be two, and they'd be like, look at those chubby legs. And I'd be like, absolutely not. She's strong. She's fast. Like, and so to your point, one of the reasons why I was really passionate about fitness and about the fitness that I exposed them to is it was always fitness that was talking about you're beautiful, you're strong. Because to your point, and that's why I love that you mentioned it, when you talk about integration, again, like I was thinking about what messages are we sharing with our kids about work? And I love that you're bringing in what messages are we sharing with our kids about their bodies and about how they treat themselves and how they treat others. And I love that example of integration there. So I just had to take a moment on that. Okay, so for everyone in the room, if you do want to hop up on stage and ask Shanna a question, she's absolutely brilliant. As I said, she's so much experience in fundraising and leadership and writing, in being a working mom. She's read more books than most people I've met on the planet. I want to ask you, Shanna, because another thing that you have done that's really extraordinary is, and I think now you're down to weekly, but you started with a daily podcast. Talk to me about that level of commitment to record a podcast every single day, what that felt like.
Well, I remember when I first told you that I was going to do this, and you were like, I love that. And that's a lot.
Well, because I always say, actually, and you said it earlier, like, what's your goal? And you hadn't written the book yet.
Mm-mm.
And you were like, I'm going to do a daily podcast. And I was like, I love that for you. And would you now rather have that than your book? Because talk me through how you're going to do both of those things.
Yes. And this conversation is so important to this because obviously I come to you for strategy and support and expertise. And I also love that, you will thoughtfully question or challenge me in a supportive, compassionate way. And that I might say to you, hey, like this is something that feels really important to me. And I can't always articulate why. So when I started this podcast, again, I am very purposeful, very intentional. I felt like the right thing I needed to do, particularly in May 2020 when I started it. The world was just falling apart and women in particular needed support. Yeah. And I created a 6-minute daily podcast because working women, like who has time for anything more than that? And and every topic was something different about careers or leadership or life. And to know that I could support women at the most challenging point in their lives in some way was compelling enough that I just somehow figured out how to do it daily. But honestly, I don't know. Now that it's weekly, even that feels like a lot.
Let's talk about for a moment, because you are so knowledgeable about the exodus of women from the workforce since COVID. And I actually feel like it's something that's missing in too much coverage of the Great Resignation. Like too much coverage of the Great Resignation is like, people are looking for their joy. People are looking for, what feels right to them. And we're not seeing a discussion of the impact that the pandemic had on working women specifically. Can we talk about that for a minute?
For sure. I think that there are some women who, I like to call the Great Resignation, the Great Realization, this sense of like, I fully understand now what is most important to me. And I think some women have chosen this new path for them, whatever that is, to fulfill something that's more important to them in a different way. And then there's others who have been literally forced out of the workforce because childcare is not available, because the schools are not reliable, daycare is not reliable, because it's just too much to expect women to continue to do all of this unpaid labor while they are doing paid labor for their companies. and not support them. And
Yeah.
this is true of all working parents, but particularly women have been hit hardest because they assume many of the childcare responsibilities. And I was reading a fascinating article that how families choose who's going to stay home, and and often, whose job is more important. And it doesn't even necessarily come down to finances. It
Mhm.
comes down to those things. Uh, and being able to support women at this time while this continues, I know we're both really passionate about that.
So passionate about it. Obviously, we have the infant formula shortage going on as well at this time in this country. We know that for women who breastfeed, that's a full-time job. Like, it's just, and I can even say we're experiencing right now. And like I said, I don't know what I would do if my mom didn't live 10 minutes away. My 2-year-old, my 2.5-year-old, there was a teacher in her class who got an asymptomatic positive. So the whole class is quarantined. Like, so when things like that happen, how are we going to support working parents in general? It is a new world. That's like, that wasn't a thing when we were in school, that it would just be like, your kid can't come to school for this indeterminate number of days. You know what I mean?
It
Like,
is hard enough with just like the unexpected snow days and like the half days and the school closures. So, yes, we've just made it 10 times harder.
yeah, it's such an important point. And do you know what else you said earlier that I wanted to highlight that I really appreciated? When you were talking about Eli being 13 and the fact that not only do parents of small children need support and need recognition, you actually made me think about my freshman year of college. I got the flu like really bad. And so I couldn't drive home. And
Mm.
so when I was 18, my mom, actually with my cousin who was in from Israel, drove the like 3.5 hours from Maryland to Franklin and Marshall, picked me up, brought me home. Now, as I said, my mom has been like the ultimate stay-at-home mom and artist, incredible artist, my entire life. But I think about the fact that just like working parents, like they never stop being parents. And so I think about like, what about that parent of that 18-year-old who's sick at college, who needs their parents to come pick them up? Like, if we have a better understanding as leaders in the workplace that, parents bring an extraordinary skill set, empathy, they bring so much to the workplace. And at the same time, whether their child is 18 months old in daycare or 18 years old at college, if they get the flu, we need to build in some flexibility for them to go pick their kid up.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the greatest joys that I ever had in my career was being a leader so that I could provide air cover and support for people to be their whole selves. And particularly whether that was working parents or not, to say that I don't need the explanation. I don't need, this will always come first. Your family, however you define that, will always come first. And to hear them say to me how lucky I am to be able to have a manager like you who understands, that will always stay with me. To provide that kind of experience will inform how they lead, and also how their children feel about their parents working.
So if I want to be that leader, but I feel like my workplace culture doesn't support that, can I change that workplace culture myself, or do I need to go lead somewhere else?
Yes, and so, yes, I always believe, regardless of what your workplace environment is like, you have the capacity to lead in your own way with your team to the best of your ability. And if you continually find that your values are not aligned with your company's, then you should consider going to lead somewhere else.
Yeah, that's good. It was interesting. Steph and I were actually in a Twitter space the other day with Scott Monty and Adam of the Best of Live Audio, and he was asking us, because we're all communications professionals, if theoretically the acquisition went through and Elon Musk led Twitter, would we want to be on his communications team to address some of the things that would potentially go on with him leading Twitter? And we actually had that same discussion of like, do you try and make changes from within, or do you say, and that's obviously an extreme example, like this doesn't align with my value set. And so I think it's a really important point. We have a few minutes left this morning, and so I always ask my guests if there's anything else you want to cover that we haven't covered yet. I'm enjoying this conversation so much. Like, I'm like, I could talk to you all day. Let's keep going. But we
I
do have
know.
to stop at 11. So what else? I mean, is there anything else? I do want to mention to everyone watching that Shanna Hocking's name is spelled correctly in the fortune cookie. Hopefully it'll be updated on her profile by the time you see the replay, but it's spelled correctly in the fortune cookie if you want to find her all the places. So if there's anything else you want to share, and then tell everyone where they can find you.
Yes. Well, I just want to share, I'm probably going to get a little emotional, how grateful I am to you, Sara, for supporting, challenging, inspiring, aligning me to achieve all of these goals that are truly important to me. And you were the person that I turned to first all those years ago. And look at us now. So, I'd love to continue this conversation on any of the topics. You can find me actively on LinkedIn, on Instagram, kind of on Twitter.
We have an amazing email list that comes out twice a month. An email newsletter that keeps people up to date on your writing. Your book is coming out this fall, which I already pre-ordered mine. Y'all, you can get the pre-order for Shanna's book on Amazon now. One bold move a day. Don't delay. You definitely want to do that. And Shanna, I always say you're my star client. And I love the fact that we agree that we don't feel that I'm proud of you is condescending as some like ex-millennials, millennials, Gen Z do, but we feel it in the spirit that's intended. Like, I'm so proud of you because I remember you saying that you remember where you were on our first call. I remember our first call. That was when my office was what now is the girls' room with their bunk bed. I remember sitting at my desk talking to you, and you were this like incredible, impactful fundraiser and speaker. And you're like, but I really want to get into writing. Like, I want to write a book someday, and I would like to publish more than occasionally, and I'd like to be all these places. And you did all of the things. And I think for me, like, that's the note that I would leave people on here. So like, we have a weekly call and you'd be like, this is my goal. Like, and we would talk about it together. And then you would go and you did all of the things. You put the work in, you put in the sweat equity, you learned the platforms, you